My entitled sister kept skipping work after college, got fired, and then pretended to have a job while hiding in mall parking lots. I covered for her, but eventually, my parents found out. So basically, my sister cut off my parents about a year and a half ago. It all started when she began skipping her full-time job shortly after graduating from community college as an electrician at 21 years old. The job ended up being at a factory for pipes, which didn't make much sense. We would try to wake her up for work because she kept sleeping in, but she just didn't care. Every time she skipped, my mother, who was a first-time immigrant from Indonesia and brought us over from there, would be pissed. She works every day, wakes up at 4 a.m. to work at a paper factory, and sometimes does overtime for days in a row because she wasn't fortunate enough to get a higher education or speak English fluently. So, to her, my sister was an absolute piece of crap for skipping work. I kept asking my sister why she was skipping, but she would just stay in bed for hours, say nothing, shrug her shoulders, or blow me off. It made me mad. Over time, she eventually got fired, obviously, after skipping so much without calling in. She told me first, which meant I was now roped into her BS. She started lying to our parents and pretending to go to work. I felt guilty and tried to hide it because I knew how mad my parents would be. She would wake up, drive to a mall parking lot, and just lay in her car all day. One time, she woke up 2 hours late for work, waddled her way to the car, and my dad, who is actually my stepdad but has been our father figure since I was 9 and my sister was 12, got suspicious. I still covered for her, saying, "Yeah, she's going to work." My stepdad is an older white man, but he's been an amazing father to us. He's done so much for us and treats us like his real daughters. This went on until my parents eventually found out. My mom was so pissed and frustrated that she lectured and argued with my sister, telling her that if she was going to live in the house for free and eat for free, she at least needed to have a job. She even threatened to kick her out. That night, I consoled her as she cried, but I also tried to explain that what she did was wrong. I went out of my way to help her look for cheap apartments, but she never actually took it seriously. And in the end, my mom never actually kicked her out either, which pissed me off because I tried to help her. Eventually, she landed another job at an arcade fixing arcade machines. It was a night shift, which worked better for her since she could never wake up early. It was only part-time, starting at around 4 p.m. But guess what? She started skipping again, laying in bed all day in the dark. She told us she was depressed and didn't want to work. I get it. We both had a tough childhood. We were tossed around between different families. She got to stay with our grandparents, but I was bounced around between everyone. Our mom left us to go to the U.S. when I was 4, and my sister was 7. Our dad was imprisoned around that time for dealing ecstasy, but as kids, we didn't understand any of that. This all happened while we were still in Indonesia. My sister's depression stems from how she was treated by our step-grandmother. I get it. It left a lasting impact on both of us. We faced cruel punishments, but mine were worse. I was naughtier, so I got it harder. One time, when I was 7, I didn't finish a 2-liter bottle of water because our step-grandma was obsessed with health and forced us to drink tons of water. She left me on the side of a busy street as punishment for dumping the water out at school instead of drinking it. Like, WTF? I was a child. Who drinks that much water? I've also gotten my ass beat a lot, but despite all of that trauma, I moved forward. I didn't let it define me. Now, at 20 years old, I don't sit around reflecting on the past. I just don't let it shape my life. But my sister, who was never punished as harshly because she was always the good one, is super depressed over it and always brings it up. I understand that people cope differently. I get why she's depressed, but that can't be her excuse for skipping work all the time. Maybe it's valid to an extent, but not in our household. Our mother's mindset is that even if you're sad or depressed, you have to work. There's no excuse. She just doesn't understand depression. That's not how things work in Indonesia. Bills need to be paid, and you don't just get to live off others. So, of course, my mom was pissed. My sister continued skipping work until she got fired from the arcade. That was my mom's last straw. Every time my sister skipped work, my mom would come into her room after a long day, lecture her, and yell at her. My mother then said, "If you're so depressed, why don't you kill yourself?" And she threw her flip knife on her bed. When my sister skipped work, she would go out, shop for groceries, and randomly make homemade food for my dad, thinking that would make up for skipping work. Obviously, my dad wasn't happy about it. He told her, "You're just trying to make me happy with food instead of working?" That broke her. She cried to me for hours, saying, "I just want to go into a forest and kill myself because Dad said he never liked my cooking." I spent 5 hours outside on the deck talking to her, reassuring her that it wasn't true. He was just mad at her for skipping work. But she kept going on and on about how mean our parents were. At that point, I was basically her therapist, and I couldn't even speak my mind because she's such a snowflake. She'll cry over anything like a toddler. I just kept reassuring her and suggesting ways she could move out if she hated living with them so much, like getting roommates for cheaper rent. Then, she started blaming our parents for everything, like not going to Drexel University and pursuing what she wanted, which is not true because we couldn't afford $80,000 a year in tuition. Even with aid, it still would have been $40,000 in debt. Be realistic. Then she played the victim card again, saying she tried therapy, but they refused to treat her. I reminded her that was because she literally sat there in silence for hours instead of talking. Eventually, she was able to get therapy with the insurance she had while unemployed. Months later, out of nowhere, she told me she had to leave but couldn't tell me where. Turns out, her therapist arranged for her to go to a homeless shelter. She stayed there for 6 months, saying she couldn't take the abuse from our mother anymore. She even got a caseworker and told them everything about the verbal abuse. She eventually cut our parents off. My mom was worried. She cried a lot and even offered to let my sister come back, promising she wouldn't speak to her. My sister, of course, said, F********. After 6 months, she finally got a job an hour away and moved into a cheap, asbestos-filled apartment. And despite cutting them off, she still takes stuff from them. I was the one tasked with driving back and forth, hauling all her stuff, furniture, clothes, and bulk necessities, by myself. My parents bought everything for her without her asking. I loaded and unloaded the car alone, drove an hour each way, and she never once thanked me. Instead, she snapped at me when I brought something she specifically said not to bring. I was done. I have school, work, and now all this BS. I'm so tired of being in the middle. My mom still asks me to check on her. My sister still uses me to communicate with them. I just don't care anymore. I hate being the middleman. I hate my life. What did I do to deserve this? One day in class, I couldn't stop filling my head with thoughts about this situation, and I ended up ranting to my sister about how I felt, how frustrated I was, how I wished everything was back to how it was or just normal, and how sad I got over everything almost every day. All she said was, "Sorry, it is what it is," and then added that she could actually hang herself in the living room,